Good evening, everyone. We're just checking if we're live or not. It may take a moment for that to start up. There we go. All right. So just a heads up on what this is. This is a live reading of the Domes of Calrathia, and this is for review purposes. I do have permission of the author to read this live. If you guys are having any difficulty hearing me or you're getting an echo, let me know in the comments. I'm probably only going to stop between the chapters to maybe add some commentary and take some notes. Since I didn't prepare any actual background images, you guys can just view some of the game files I use for the backgrounds in my regular videos. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I will try to do this as professionally as I can, but we'll see how that goes. Let me get this. Yeah, and that's just RimWorld going in the background. So, all right. The Domes of Calrathia by Issac Young. Start where everybody starts at Chapter 1. Of all the men who inhabit the strange lands south of the great ice plain, I was told there are 3 varieties. The maddened cannibals whose heads are cut in the shapes of their hallowed obelisk, the wandering ghost men who eat nothing and yet still live, and the men of Calrathia, set huddled in their great domes, which are vast enough to encompass cities. I, the astronomer Sirius, had only heard tall tales and faded stories of such things, and not long into my journey, it seems, I would die before encountering any of them. The white wolf's jaws splayed wide atop me, snapping with hungry impatience. Saliva and blood, and, I believe, tattered flesh from my leg dribbled out of its sharp teeth. I had my hand gripped around its neck, keeping the wolf's snout from tearing into my shoulder. Its front paw clawed at my blue mantle, ripping long tracks through the battered cloak. The wolf's other foreleg was thankfully missing, being a stump from some old, forgotten injury. Glancing to my side, I saw that my sword had fallen out of reach. Not that I could have used it in such close quarters. The distraction almost cost me my life, as the wolf snapped again, this time grazing against my face. Its foul breath made me choke as my arm threatened to buckle under the weight. I barely had the strength to hold off the beast, let alone throw it aside into the snowy brush. Quickly, I realized this was a losing battle. The wolf had lunged perfectly, using his weight to tire me, as he must have done with other large game. I could see I was fighting a grizzled veteran who had seen many battles, and I was his easy meal. Seeing no other option, I gave up trying to hold the beast at bay. Instead, I pulled it close and rammed my free arm into the wolf's throat. The animal sputtered, surprised at this new development. Its hungry eyes grew frustrated as it tried to bite down. Its teeth sunk into my arm readily enough, but I would not budge. If I felt any pain, I cannot recall any now. Even the skeptics, who seemed to find every cause and reason to moan about life, often rediscover their enthusiasm at the executioner's block. The body understands death is unnatural, even should the mind be convinced otherwise. Hi, Morley. One finds they will go to extraordinary lengths to live, and so I summoned new strength to struggle on. I wrestled in the red snow. I pivoted away from its forepaws, but the animal still found some purchase. awkwardly scratching me as it attempted to draw back. I did not slacken my grip. One arm held the beast too close to use its claws, and the other slowly choking it. The wolf's movements became increasingly desperate as I realized it could not escape its current predicament. The once hungry eye darted around frantically as if trying to find escape. It did not matter. I shoved my arm further down its throat, even as the wolf's teeth gouged my limbs. A weary and gasping minute passed. The beast was malnourished and missing a leg. Had it been a healthy animal at the peak of its strength, I surely would have been bested. However, that was not the case. I strangled the wolf until its movements became weaker and finally limp. The warrior's eyes rested weightily upon me, and it accepted its defeat. Still, I did not let go until I felt the beast's racing heart fall silent. My strength finally faded. The warm corpse of the wolf slid off beside me. Blood oozed out of my wound onto the ground, and I looked up into the treetops of the dark forest. The snow-laden branches were so thick that I had no chance of spotting any emerald shimmer in the night sky. Even the pearl-faced moon was nearly swallowed up. How I wished to be home again, studying the glass scrolls under Master Rigel. How I desired to again swim in the river and feel the warmth of the zodiac's furnace sun upon my face. How I so desperately longed for my brothers, whose names have turned bitter in my mouth, and whose faces I shall never see again. I pushed myself up and examined my injuries. The wolf had bitten deeply into my left leg, where it had first attacked, and the ripped trousers were now soaked crimson. Similarly, my mangled arm was not doing much better. Taking some bandages from my satchel, I tightly wrapped them around my wounds. As my other wounds were more superficial, I elected to address them later. As I recovered in the splotched snow, the cold began to sink its icy fingers into me. I knew that I could not stay for very long. I knew that I could not stay for very much longer. I had intended to cross this forest before nightfall, but the terrain became progressively more difficult. Large craters carved deep into the rocky earth, and more than once I had to take long detours or climb steep rock faces. During the day, the land seemed almost serene in its stark beauty. During the night, it had turned into a silent, brooding forest. It was not safe to make a camp. I feared a fire would draw more attention than it would ward. My only hope was the walled city of Terminus, on the other side of the forest. Stumbling to my feet, I gathered my meager possessions. I slid my humble sword back into its leather sheath, and I spared one last look at the warrior I had slain. The white wolf's face was calm, almost like it was sleeping. It was a well-earned rest. The creature was not old and maimed. The creature was old and maimed, its hide covered in scars, and it was missing an ear. Perhaps many would call such a creature ugly. However, I was nothing but nobility in the wolf's beaten frame. I saw nothing but nobility in the wolf's beaten frame. The warrior had given his best, and to die in battle was a better end than most. Far better than cowardly crawling into some hole to die. He had lived his life well spent, and had the ground not been frozen solid, I would have buried him. Instead, all I could offer up was some snow sprinkled on his furred side. I took my leave and continued forward. I trudged up a forested ridgeline to chance a better view of the surrounding area. However, the thicket pressed in, My sword caught on branches that reached out like skeletal hands to deter my progress. The cold now gripped my bones, sapping what strength I had left. It was more than the sorry state of my clothes. I wondered just how much blood I'd lost back there. Thrashing my way out onto the small clearing, I found a large gnarled tree by a small stream. The roots drank deeply from the water, and amongst them was a small alcove. It was little more than a narrow crook to rest, but my feet weighed as lead. My back ached, and I was so exhausted I had experienced death to come by violence. But here I felt a new terror. I heard a sweet voice from those dark roots, one that whispered to me to rest there. A grave fit for a king, I thought. I struggled with a pained laugh. I had journeyed from the skyward city, home of the astronomers. I had vaulted with the anemoi, going a great distance. I had seen the twin ruined towers of Callus and Calix before crossing into this cursed forest. And here I was finally tempted to die. I reached into my satchel and brought out the object of my mission. In my hands was a tome gilded with silver and gold. The title, Historiae Astrologus, was emblazoned on the cover of the spiraled illustration. The illuminated manuscript was no less decorated on the parchment. It contained the history of my profession, and it was my burden to take it to Calrathia, or die trying. The book felt heavy in my hands, and although I dearly wanted to open it, I did not wish to accidentally stain the fine paper with my blood. I held it for a minute, remembering Master Rigel's charge. My name had been struck from every letter, every record, every book, save for this one, which had been written when I was just a child. Other hands would have to carry it now. The sweet lullaby was pulling my eyelids closed. It was as lovely as any nymph singing of warmth and rest and peace. I placed the book back into my satchel and trudged towards my death. Too much had been asked of me. It was too much to ask of any man, but I was grateful that I had made it this far. Sleep pulled its dark curtain over me. I stumbled over a root, but as I took the final step to that twisted coffin, a beam of pristine moonlight cut through the night, and I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Footprints. The spell was broken. I quickly hobbled over to the tracks. It had not snowed for some time, and from what little I could gather, they appeared fresh. 2 sets of tracks were going along the bank of the stream before continuing on the other side. They traveled for a distance, and then I could see where they went no longer. I was tempted to call out, but I was still wary of alerting more beasts to my presence. My only choice was to follow and hope whoever made these tracks could come to my aid. Wounded as I was, my heavy feet became light as feathers. Hope blazed within me, and hope carried me through that dark path. And even if I were fated to die at the end of this trail, my heart still leapt in my chest, and I gave thankful prayers to the woman of the morning star, forever the patron of the school of astronomers. Such a gift, even the smallest sliver of hope is. As I limped through the dark woods, I came to another clearing. This time I arrived at the foot of a small hill that overlooked much of the surrounding wood. A metal door was embedded in that rocky uprising, and I excitedly ran towards it. I knew that bunkers and tunnels crisscrossed this region from a time long before these lands were known for their known for their endless winter. Of those days, men recall that the land had not yet been divided between the ocean, and that great scaly beast still roamed the wilds. Despite my great hopes, there was little sign of life behind the hatch. A thick, dirty block of glass refused to reveal the shelter's secrets. At the sides, bolted the complicated locks bolted the door shut, and in the center was a rusted locking wheel. I scrambled to open it, but the mechanism refused to budge. I realized that the door must somehow be secured from the inside. Seeing no choice, I banged on the metal hatch set in the hillside. I waited for a minute before I banged again. I howled, I cried. Though men seldom admit grief, I shall not spare my dignity in this account. Despite my temptation at the gnarled tree, now I didn't want to die. I wasn't ready to die. This hatch was my only salvation. I wept at its foot, praying someone would answer. I fell sideways into the snow. My strength all but left me. In the distance, I heard the howl of a wolf. I fancied it was the ghost of the warrior I had slain. Up and up, it went into the sky until I could hear it no more. Light, searing light. I had to look away as a great shining beam sprung from the recesses of darkness. I laid there in the snow as I saw a silhouette looking through the glass. There was a rumbling on the other side of the door. Slowly the locks began to click open. There was a rush of warm air, and a figure stepped out. My eyes adjusted as I saw a thick mask covering most of the head. 2 empty holes looked back at me, and near the mouth, 2 bulbous protrusions wheezed. That's the end of chapter 1. Give me a moment, I need to get a little water. So a little bit mysterious so far. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the reading. Feel free to backtrack. I am just reading as I go along. And forgive me if I wheeze or stutter a bit. Hay fever still's got me pretty good. Anyway, moving on to chapter 2. Awakened from Death. I awoke on a mattress in the concrete cell. A sickly yellow light buzzed above me. Somehow both too dark to illuminate the room, and yet too bright for the sweet lull of darkness. A heavy blanket had been thrown over me. Sweat caked my naked body, and I was burning. I tried to throw the thick cover off, but I found I was too weak. Turning my head, I noticed a bowl of water and a loaf of bread placed near me. I leaned forward, though I was tempted to lick from the bowl. The ways of my school made me pause. I reached my shaking hand into the cool water and brought it to my lips. I did this 4 or 5 times before I was unable to continue. After I rested some more, I tasted the loaf, chewing slowly and eating as much as possible. Once I was satisfied of food and drink, I could do not much more than stare at the ceiling and shut my eyes in the uncomfortable light. I noticed a door on the other side of the small room. Not that I had the strength to clamber up, let alone try to open it. I was now firmly at my captor's mercy. I turned so that my cheek rested against the pillow, and I tried to go back to sleep. But there is what the mind desires and what the body demands, and I have found the thoughtless comforts unfortunately fall in the latter domain. So I entertained myself with conjectures, prone as I am to such musings. I have often walked in the realm of dreaming and waking. and I do not think in the usual manner. I remember my dreams as if I had lived them, and my dreams come to me even in the day. There have been occasions when I have mistaken dream for memory, and forgotten the world for the eye of its beholder. As I teetered between these two realms, I came to ponder the third. There is a certain space between waking and slumber, where thoughts come unbidden and leave just as suddenly. In this place, you do not exist, at least not as you understand yourself. It is not the dream, but the darkness beneath, the abyss below before surfacing again, on, on either side. Some people claim that this world is the real version of yourself, the lowest level of your being, from whence everything springs forth. Having recalled my many travels there, I think this is folly. So many try to plunge into darkness seeking light, delving into chaos for order. To always travel downward does not mean that you will get at the heart of things. After all, to understand a tree, you would not only look at its roots. And if you were to truly understand the forest, you must look at the woodland above with the same mystery as you would below. Such strange thoughts and more I pondered until I woke again. I was still feverish and weak, but at least I was stronger than before. Infection raged within me, but I was more concerned about my wounds. Should I stay in this condition, I would not be able to resume my journey for many months. I knew what had to be done, but I was scared of doing it. "You're in bad shape." Startled, I clutched at the blanket, realizing there was a man sitting next to me. In his hands, he held the same mask he had worn earlier. It sloughed away in his fingers as if a snake had been shedding the wrong skin. Though from this man's appearance, I could tell he was no snake. A measure of his sandy hair crested his head. His features were that of a noble soldier who had fought far too long, a portrait for the end of youth. While he still commanded high cheeks and a sturdy jaw, the skin was drawn around his tired blue eyes. His thin frame spoke of hardship and lean muscle. There were no wrinkles or graying hair. But I knew this man was old, far older than he looked. He picked at his mask curiously, weighing it unfamiliar in his hands. "Was it a wolf?" he finally asked, looking up. I hesitantly nodded. "You're lucky, then." "Where are my possessions?" I asked, immediately fearful for the book. The man did not answer. He stared at me with crooked eyes. "Who are you?" I changed the question. "A soldier, same as you. You're safe for now. You're at an old supply cache. We used these once for scouting parties." "How far am I from Terminus?" He glanced away. "Close enough, I'd wager." "I need to get there." He chuckled. "That shouldn't concern you." "Why?" "Because I haven't decided whether or not to kill you." I considered this gravely and thought on my answer. "Very well, but I should inform you that I've sworn not to die until I reach my destination." The man's chuckle grew into a hoarse laughter. "Those are bold words. For that I shall counsel you with my thoughts so that you have some say in my dilemma." I had never been more attentive to another's speech in my life. The man began. "The secrecy of these caches is paramount, and there are many enemies who wish to plunder them. In light of this, I was ordered by my commander to kill anyone who stumbled upon them. It is just as well, for no one travels these lands who is not a warrior and prepared to meet a warrior's end. But you spared me, I ventured. It is not honorable to murder a wounded man begging for aid, the man replied. Additionally, keeping you alive meant I had more time to ponder the situation until I could make more of a permanent decision. Sneeze coming, hang on. Ugh. It is a bit, Michael, this is a little bit heavier, yes. Hopefully it does lighten up, but we'll see. All right, where was I? The stranger's eyes dug into me. As I asked you, what would you do? I ask you, what would you do in my place? Should I disregard my commander and abandon the duty assigned to me? Or perhaps I should keep my oath and forever soil my hands with your blood? I knew that no plea for my life or my quest would reach the man's ears. Only honor had stayed his hand, and only by honor would he allow me to live. And I myself pondered whether it was honorable that I should walk from this room. Death here would be a strange end to my mission, but not the worst one, I think. I sat upright and opened my mouth. Though you should know I planned no contrivance in my speech. I wanted to know whether the potentate would let me die, even after all I had done. The question is one of authority, I proposed. A prince's decree can be overruled by a king's. So too can one law take precedence over another. So I ask you, which of the two is higher in this case? I swore no oath to the law. I swore no oath to the laws of honor or common decency of man, and soldiers are permitted to do those things that are taboo to defend their countrymen. It seems to me that my commander's order is higher. That may be. I did not rush into my words, and I think that is what saved me. But your commander is still bound by that law, unless he would forsake his vocation and become but a bandit and a thief. His authority to kill rests solely on the authority of the potentate. Otherwise, he would find him evil. The moral law is higher than your commander's. The soldier grinned. That is the correct answer. He spoke with a certainty that told me he had come to that conclusion long before. I stared at him in question. You might be surprised, but these situations have happened before, and many guards have come up with riddles to test those who stumble upon our caches. I prefer this one because I find the most honest faces are those faced with the threat of death. If you had proven to be a man of law, or at least of honor, then there was little risk of letting you live. And if I had proven to be a savage? The man's eyes grew a little cold. I would have nursed you back to health still, but I am not obliged to defend such men, nor am I responsible for them once they leave my shelter. I will tell you that there is only one path out of this bunker, and dozens lead to the tunnels deep below. From his tone, I realized I did not want to know what dwelt in the deep tunnels. But what if I was a charlatan who only used my knowledge of law for my own ends? The soldier scoffed. Then the wolf would have gotten you. Know this, these lands are home to many things and many peoples, but it is not kind to those who are dishonest. Men are dishonest to hide their weakness, and this land swallows weak men with an unquenchable thirst. I nodded, and I relaxed, leaning back on the cot, contemplating all that had happened. The stranger stood up from the corner. I had one other assurance. I looked through your satchel and I saw the manuscript. Stories say that the schools once set course once set corsairs once set couriers to Calrathia to store all knowledge, but I have heard of none attempting to trek the centuries. Let me advise you, go back. The road is far too dangerous. After Terminus, there will be no respite. There is only the cold and the things that lurk within it. You barely survived a wolf. I was taken by surprise, I coolly responded. This elicited another snort from the stranger. If you don't perish, you will be allowed to stay until you get your strength back. After that, I can feed you no longer. I'll leave in a few hours. The stranger turned at that. You're very ill. You can't even walk. Bring me my possessions, I told him, and a vial of anesthetic. Looking over my bandages, I realized that they had been changed regularly. The stranger had done an adequate job of stitching my wounds, though red streaks of infection spread out from where the wolf had bitten my arm and leg. Had I left these to their natural course, I suspect I would have eventually lost them to amputation, or, even if I was lucky, I would never have been able to walk without a limp again. The man returned with my clothes and satchel. Strapped on his back was my sword, although he soon placed it in the corner with the rest. I dug through my satchel until I found a crimson vial. Thankfully, it was unbroken. I know your wounds ache, but stopping the pain will not help you. The man pulled out some anesthesia and a syringe. It isn't for my wounds, I responded as I held out my hand. He handed me the syringe, and I began measuring out the dose of the anesthesia and red liquid. There are certain concoctions warriors are apt to use, at least those who live near the alchemists. One of these is Bene tincture. With astronomers, I was taught in its careful application. Too much, and the flesh becomes a cancerous tumor unto itself. Too little, and the flesh heals partly, but necrotizes soon after. I took the needle and first numbed the area around the rune with the anesthesia. Even so, my hands were shaking as I reached for the blood-red vial. They say Bene does not heal you so much as replaces your flesh with itself. That with every passing use, you lose more and more of yourself. I personally cannot attest to this tall tale. I have seen the healed wounds and could not discern the difference. Also, it has been used on me on several occasions, although each time I was thankfully first put asleep. But that was precisely the reason I was so afraid, knowing the pain it would cause. I pulled the plunger on the syringe, slowly filling it with the crimson fluid. Using the graduations on the syringe, I measured the right amount. I rested the needle on the vein of my wounded arm and looked up at the man. It would be best to leave this room for a while. He nodded and exited out into the hall, closing the door behind him. I pushed the needle into my arm and pressed down on the plunger. Of what followed next, I shall refrain from reporting to you. The laws of nature are not ignored so easily. The rapid growth of flesh even in the wounds as superficial as mine, did not conform, did not conform well with the laws of conservation of mass. All you need to know is that I needed nothing to bite down on. I would have bitten through any cloth, and my tongue would regrow back anyway. I stepped out from the door an hour later, fully clothed and accounted. I shivered, though I was not cold. Strength had returned to a weak body, and health would come soon enough. The stranger looked me up and down in shock. He stepped back. I confess I did not believe you. I have only heard stories of such miracles. I have seen many things within the curved lands of Zodiac, and many more on my travels. This one I would rather not talk about. The stranger nodded grimly. I do not wish to burden you any more than I already have, but may I ask one more favor? I haven't had a good meal in several days. He led me down the hall into another concrete room. This time, the walls were lined with shelves stocked with goods. Much of it was canned food, but my eyes wandered to a shelf in the corner that held several rusted firearms. Perhaps they had seen battle a long time ago. However, they were now relics of a bygone era. I was offered such a weapon to aid me in my exile, but I refused it. I am normally not a superstitious man, but even I feared calling upon the spirits of the wrathful dead. In the center was a lone table made of thin wood. There were 4 stools, though I had neither seen nor heard any trace of other men besides my newfound host. I sat down while the soldier brought some canned meat and 2 cups. Reaching to the shelf beside us, he placed a dark brown bottle on the table. Taking the cork out, he poured a double shot in each. We both did our prayers before supping. If you do not mind a few questions, the man tore into a chunk of meat. Why are you making this journey? In the past, great ships could have taken you from Terminus to Calrathia in a few hours. When they finally fell into disrepair, most gave up. Even the faithful who pressed on with the ice skimmers had had to desist once the winters grew worse and the cannibals acquired a taste for their flesh. I tell you now, conditions surely have not improved in their intervening centuries. It is the last thing I can do for my school. I was banished from Zodiac and cannot return under pain of death. The man raised an eyebrow, but he had the sense not to pry into the reasons behind my exile, though doubtless he guessed at them. And if you reach Calrathia, only then will they permit you to return to the school? I was silent for a moment. No. The man nodded solemnly. I do not wish to tempt you from your path, but many men would abandon this road. I took a deep breath and drank some of the liquor. According to our custom, an astronomer may be sent into exile. He may be stripped of his mantle and abandoned to the earth, but he may never cease to be an astronomer. It is so with many of the schools. I am still bound by law to deliver the manuscript as a condition of my exile. I cannot stray from this path. The man thought this over, and we ate in silence for a time. Once I would have considered this meal to be rather lacking. However, after many days of travel, any food was delicious. It is another of those contradictions one encounters in life. Food is far more enjoyed by a man who fasts rather than a man who has plenty. I have come to a decision, the soldier announced. I will accompany you to Terminus. The city is not without its dangers, and I would not see you come to harm before your true journey begins. That is most generous. But who will guard this shelter? I have not seen anyone else. It will not be long. Terminus is a day's journey, and it should be a short order to acquire what you need for the road south. Then I shall gladly accept your help, and I will. And I took one last bite before standing up. We departed not long after. Whew. My hay fever's acting up a bit. Give me a second. Ugh. I don't know if you guys can hear me wheezing through the microphone or not. Spring is one of the best times of the year. I get to do all the gardening, and I also get to suffer all the pollen. But yes, Michael, this book is appearing to be a little bit darker than I originally thought it was going to be. Anyway, continuing on to Chapter 3, The Stone Rejected. Admittedly, I am not a master of beginnings, and some will question my account of why I did not start here. But as any man who has set ink to paper knows, our lives are but a great multitude of beginnings, and a man ought to choose his start very carefully. Should I have begun at my birth, that would relay to you many stories personal to me and yet irrelevant to you. Should I have started earlier with my parents? Are their stories not more important than mine? They begot me, and so I necessarily depend on them. But according to that logic, no story matters except the first one, that of our first parents, and yet it is not by their birth with which we measure history. Should I have begun at my elevation? Perhaps you will learn about it later, but I am not eager to discuss such details now. No, I began with the wolf because his end was another beginning, one that ought to be remarked upon. His was the first life I took along my pilgrimage, and it would not be the last. Whatever you make of this account, I want you to know these words are penned with blood, and much of it my own. I was not gifted in the consolidation. I was not gifted in the consolation of a cell. My crime was far too heinous to be thrown into the bowels of Zodiac, where the hair falls out and the flesh sloughs from the bone. No, that would be too generous. Instead, I have been confined to my quarters and told to wait until further instructions. Some might scoff at such chastisement, but I tell you there is little worse than staying in a home that is no longer yours. What was once familiar and trusted had suddenly turned cold. The world had turned on its head, and the faces I knew turned away. Home was no longer home, and I doubted it would ever have one again. And I doubted I would ever have one again. And my quarters may as well have been a cell. I had little more than a desk and a hammock. Astronomers were expected to spend most of their time abroad for research. However, in recent centuries, most only ventured a little ways past the city gates to spend their coin on drink and fine company. After all, there was nothing left to explore. Nothing was new under the sun. Any sun. A knock on the door caught my attention. Guards with faces of bronze and sanguine cloaks of night entered the room, beckoning me to leave with them. I could have resisted, but there was no point. They quietly led me from my quarters to the chromatic tower, the tallest spire of the interstellar observatory. Interstellar? Okay. I knew I would receive word of my sentencing, undoubtedly some form of execution. Privately, I wondered how severe it was going to be. I have heard tales of a school of torturers who prepared the grisliest ends, though though I never learned if there was any veracity to the rumors. Still, I resigned myself to whatever fate awaited me. We walked down the arched corridors, passing no one except a few initiates who paused and gawked at us. The glass, the glass alcazar had always been empty, far too large for its dwindling occupants. But as I walked with swords at my back, the emptiness suddenly struck me as sorrowful. Having now wandered the frozen wastes, I have come to realize that a home always mourns without its people. In quick time, we climbed the spiral stairs of the chromatic tower. The staircase reaches so high in the Zodiac that strangers to the Alcazar find themselves stumbling or skipping steps as they ascend. Often visitors resort to awkwardly jumping, leaping 5 or 6 rungs at a time when they near the top. But we astronomers tread lightly, and our feet barely press against the steps. As part of our vocation, we are accustomed to the difficult embraces of the heavenly sphere. Indeed, one of the first things we teach in brain is not wanting to brain right now. Noviates is moving gracefully in the lower preliminaries. Before I had time to think further, I was ushered into the study of Master Rigel. Empty shelves meant for thousands of tomes ringed marble rooms. Most of the books had been sold, and the rest being lost or destroyed over the long years. Master Rigel had given up on trying to replace them. After all, no one came to ask any more. Our order was no longer interested in building new ships or deciphering temporal telescopics, and we no longer had the manpower for such pursuits anyway. His desk was in the center of the room and similarly sparse, with only a few documents pertaining to the school's management. Above him, a domed ceiling depicted a fading mural of our founder slaying the dragon Delphine. I noticed his gaze was always pointed downward, as if in silent judgment of the people below. Master Rigel himself was hunched over, writing some papers. His blue mantle was threaded with gold of many stars. And despite his age, remained extravagant to the eye. His wrinkled face glanced up as we walked in. 2 silver orbs stared back at me. As is customary with astronomers, the scalia of our eyes are dyed silver and decorated with extensive patterns. "You may leave," he motioned to the bronze-faced guards before standing up. The guards nodded and closed the door behind them. Master Rigel cleared his desk, and he stood up, the movement that must have been quite painful for him. He was always hunched over and needed a cane to walk about. Even in the chromatic tower, which was one of the few buildings that reached all the way to the center of Zodiac, provided no comfort for him. He stared at me for a moment before speaking. "I know it wasn't you. You should stop pretending." "How do you know that, Master?" "You wouldn't have ran if it were." I looked away and mumbled, "I assure you, I'm not as honorable." "This is nothing to do with honor." Rigel stamped his cane. "You wouldn't have ran because you wouldn't have been caught. Instead, you plainly announced your guilt and sent half the school searching after you in the skyways. I ask again, who are you protecting?" "I cannot answer that question, Master." "Under the threat of death?" "Under the threat of death." And even if I command you. I winced at that, but I nodded. Master Rigel stamped his cane again. You would break the school. You would break the law of our school. I cannot answer the question. Master Rigel groaned and rubbed his eyes. You've always were a stubborn student. Too stubborn. I cannot help you this time, Sirius. The old man walked back and forth. His cane tapped the floor rhythmically as he thought about what to do. They are planning to execute you by suffocation. It will not be quick. When is the appointed day? I asked. 2 days from now, perhaps the day after. They're going to make an example out of you first. They will have your eyes put out and your tongue taken beforehand. Then there's nothing left to do. Truly, I did not want to continue this conversation in front of the man who had taught me and put his faith in me. Now he was possibly the only person left in the world who still knew me as the man I was. I remembered the day I left Master Rigel, who instructed all the young novites. I think it's novitiates. For the tutelage of Master Algol. Nothing had been right since. You still don't understand the gravity of what you've taken responsibility for, Master Rigel continued pacing. You've sullied the name of our school. Perhaps we could have been more lenient in the past. Perhaps we could have even protected you. His eyes were cast down. I knew the name was sullied either way, even if I had told the truth. Master Rigel turned his head away. You know as well as I do the low station of our school. What you may not know is that Zodak is considering the abolishment of our order. For what reason? I nearly shouted. I could not believe the words that were being said. You know why? The astronomers have not produced a new insight or useful tool in hundreds of years. None of the other schools have either. I protested. No one has, not for 1,000 years. There is nothing left to learn. Yes, but you forget. The alchemists have the Benet drug. The machinists have their self-sufficient panopticon. But what do we provide? Of what value do the astronomers produce, and produce alone? I fell silent, for I knew there was none. There was a reason so many of our school had fallen away to their own lusts. There was a reason why so many did nothing except read old tomes and reminisce. The days of the astronomers are coming to a close, Sirius. Our order will die in the next few generations, and this crime that has been laid at your feet means we have to surrender you to the Lord Praetor, or we will meet a hastened end. I ask you once more, who are you protecting? I found that I could not answer. I opened my mouth, but I could not speak the words. Master Rigel sighed. Very well. You leave me no choice. He stamped his cane twice and went over to his desk. Reaching his hand under, I heard the distinct click of a lock. A hidden drawer popped out of the wooden frame. I was curious, but I did not dare look inside. I wish I could offer this to you as a gift. You will die more painfully than what the Lord Praetor has planned for you. He can only kill you, but with this you might perform one last service to our school. What is it? I asked. You weren't alive for when it was in use. Nor I, nor my father, nor his father. But there is one law to which you may appeal. It has been nearly forgotten except by the oldest of us, but this law is still sacred among the schools. It will be honored even now. Instead of execution, you may choose exile and deliver a tome to Calrathia. I blinked. Of course. I knew the stories of the pilgrimage. Millennia ago, it was a great honor to make the journey. The greatest secrets were entrusted only to those worthy of the journey. But as the school's great achievements grew to a still, all that was left to send were missives on who had died and who had taken their place. The task was given over to adventure-seeking novitiates, who had more air in their heads than sense. Then came the day when the great ships finally failed, and no one could be bothered to repair them. I know the road is dangerous, but why would I not choose this? I asked. Master Rigel drew a deep breath. The Lord Praetor will execute you, but if you choose exile, you will be stripped of your mantle. Once you have arrived at the ruined shrine and the enemy will be made to hate you. You will be struck from every record. You will have never existed. Is this all that's left? Death or shame? Name the one you are protecting. I beg you. I cannot. Master Rigel lifted the book out of the drawer. It was beautiful. The illuminated manuscript must have taken years to craft. Constellations appeared to whirl in little orbits on the trim. The golden text was set into the deepest of sapphire blue. The very title of the book leapt from the cover like the wildest of anime. Master Rigel stepped forward, holding it out. I was afraid to even touch it, worried my fingers would taint this treasure. If you accept this, you will take an oath to deliver it to Calrathia. I suppose you can sell it and run away. There will be no one accompanying you. If you find the right buyer, it would provide you with wealth to last the rest of your days. I wouldn't, I said. I know. If you were any other student, I would have left you to the Lord Praetor. I shook my head. But why send this on a pilgrimage? It's a treasure. This book is the final accounting of the astronomers. It is our last act. It is the last record of all that we have learned and achieved. It belongs in Calrathia, not collecting dust in some magi's library or passed over by a diminutive scholar. I could do nothing else but bow and accept the burden. I broke down and wept, finally realizing what Master Rigel was trying to offer me. Many men balk at their humiliation and execution, but I embraced this book as I would a father of a lost child. I had lost my life, but now I might gain a good death. The stripping of the mantle is not a long ceremony. The individual is taken to the courtyard of 1,000 mirrors, where it is said all light finds its eventual end. The castigated is made to stand near the great sundial, just below where the shadow strikes. An appointed master takes a knife and cuts the golden string fastening the cloak to the shoulders. He then throws the mantle on the ground where it is to be trampled. From the lowliest novitiate to the highest master, everyone steps on the cloak. From there, the reprobate is grabbed by the arms and made to kiss the dust 3 times. The first is for breaking his vows before the potentate. The second is for the betrayal of his brotherhood. The third is for the penance of his soul. It is during this time that the traitor is spat upon and cursed. A measure of blood is taken from the individual. The anemoi are made to smell it, and they feel the sting of hot, and then they feel the sting of a hot iron. From this, they will forever associate the man with the sin of betrayal. There shall never be a day more pained in my memory as when I lifted my fingers to the enemy and they recoiled and turned to the sky. Of everything I have suffered and have yet to suffer, I shall never forget their look upon me. They alone might be called innocent of all the creatures that walk and swim and fly upon humanity's dominion. Save for man himself, they are singularly graced by the love of the potentate. I was left alone on that stone pedestal, abandoned by everything and everyone that I loved. All that was left to me was the cold. I wrapped myself tightly with a beggar's cloak, and I took my first steps on a land so old it had died of despair. And as my footprints left faded impressions in the snow, I could not help but remember for whom I had lost so much. All right, guys. That brings us to the end of chapter 3, and sadly, I'm going to have to end things there because my throat is going raw. So I will probably do another stream sometime next week to continue doing the reading of this book. And I will leave this stream up for a bit so that I can listen to it and write my own notes. I do thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully the next stream will be a little bit longer as the pollen dies out and my hay fever isn't trying to kill me. Thank you guys for being here.